hire some counselors and additional interns to manage the children. I submit, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I will allow Honorable Peters the first.
Thank you, Chair. The last statement was very, very enriching. But I want to assure the ministry team that as member of parliament, we are concerned. That is why we are asking hard questions. And also, what I expected, Chair, is what he has just said. When we ask questions, we give you time to have a contingency plan, what others call scenarios, that when we return to school, these are going to be the infrastructure requirement. And you can cut it across all sectoral, including our CDF, to help out where necessary. For example, when you say fumigation will be taken and you don't worry, some of these things are long-term that you need to budget properly. We don't know where this disease is ending. It might go for a year. And always, such diseases have, with slow onset like this, have a rebound capability and mutations. So what we wanted from UCS, provoke your thinking, your planning, invoke your research division so that you get the right data and you put budgetary requisition. This is a house of budget. And we can only do that if you articulated your issues very well and put it in proposal form. So in closing, what I'm saying is that this is health, safety, and wellness. And I saw somewhere the CS was looking for 24 billion to respond to most of these things. Those are what we wanted to see and convince us as lawmakers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Peters. I want to open the floor procedurally to members of the Education Committee, then later on to other members. I will allow member who is on Zoom, member for Migori, to ask one question. Kindly, are you there, Dr. Pamela? Just one question, and then we'll also allow Amos Kimunya to also ask if he's on. Daktari.
Chair. Point of order. You can't say education. Chair.
Yes. What's out of order?
Let the member wear a mask before she addresses.
Oh, she's alone.
Out of order. Yes. Proceed, Pamela. Yes. Where is she?
She's alone in the house. Okay.
No. Okay, she's not even within the presence. Yes.
She's there.
Daktari, the floor is yours. Hey, volume. The order.
Yes, I can hear you, Chair, and thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this meeting Zoom.
Yes, ask the question.
Chair,
Yes.
Chair, my question, I think I was more keen to hear a little bit of clarification on the plans that the ministry has on the coping and recovery strategies should this pandemic persist. As we know, the kind of virus we are dealing with may not be the kind of one that will just get finished at once. But I think when he was responding to the question from Honorable Owino of Dewa, then he has touched on it. And my question also has been answered when he said that he would be coming up with a budget line to enable the ministry to even expand the infrastructure, especially in the physical sitting of the children, given that he has submitted that they will have to adhere strictly to the ministry guideline, especially on social distancing. So I'm looking forward to that budget, and I want to assure the minister that we will.
Do you have a question?
Because we are all Kenyans and we know the problems that we are facing in the country.
She has asked already.
Oh, you have asked the question already. Yes.
On coping.
And I think let's now give the floor to. Let's give the floor to Honorable.
Was on
Yeah.
the coping and recovery strategies.
Is she on? Yes. Let's now give the floor to Honorable Kimunya to ask one question. Yes, kindly connect him.
Yeah. Can you hear
Yes. ICT, have you connected?
Yes, can you hear me?
Tell him yes.
Yes, proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Just one question.
Yes, I've connected. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Chair. I just would like to ask the Minister, the CS, I know he talked about the private schools. And I'd like to ask that, given that the private schools,
Somebody's mixing.
their costs, and this has been adversely obviously affected.
Let Pamela remove her mic, yes.
What measures did the ministry take to ensure that these private schools do not collapse economically and obviously compromise the...
Yes, proceed, Dr.
Are we having a clash?
No, proceed, proceed.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Please.
Yeah, you can hear me now. Thanks. Yeah, given that private schools rely on the fees to cover their costs, now what and obviously with the closure they've been adversely affected. What measures is the ministry taking to ensure that these schools do not collapse economically, which will obviously compromise the education of the learners who are currently enrolled in those schools? And Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things that we might want to look at is can the ministry consider extending the capitation fees to these private schools, because so long to end up getting into the public school system, and if there's no funding that follows their joining the public schools, it obviously means there'll be a financial burden to those public schools. So it's something for the ministry to think about, but if they've already thought about it, perhaps you can share the CS with us.
Thank you. Thank you for those two questions. I think the other members, Honorable Danga, I think we are through with the Kimunya and Dr. Pamela.
Yes.
Honorable Danga. Yes? Yes, yes, ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. It's not necessarily that I will ask a question, because this is a session of engagement, and sometimes I may give an idea and just want a response, not an answer. So first of all, I want to touch on the issue the PS talked about, the issues of interministerial business and so on. I want to probably bring him to speed to the fact that as constituencies, we made contributions of over 4 million each, the money we gave to the Ministry of ICT for the purpose of establishing the ICT hubs in our constituencies. Yes. Probably the ministry will tap into that and also engage with the Ministry of ICT to ensure that this is done very fast so that it can still be used as a measure of as an intervention to help some of the areas where we have challenges with the issues of ICT. This is an issue that I wanted that I should bring out so that it is handled. And two, I want to inform the ministry, and I know that the ministry is also in a catch-22 situation, that there are some institutions in this country which have continued operating. There's one, and because I was confronted by a parent, they had kept a child in school, and the parent wanted the child back to go to Mombasa where the parents stay. But then when I continued prodding them, I rang the school and they said that the ministry had actually assessed the institution because it is keeping, it is like a school and a home care, you know, these institutions that keep the destitute children. And so the children are in school, but the ministry assessed, and then they were told that they ensure that they follow the containment, the precautionary measures that have been put in place. So these are the kind of things I would like the ministry, if it is true, that they communicate and they make parents aware, everybody aware, that this is the situation, because some of those children, like the destitute children, really may not have some place to go. And therefore, information getting out and reaching out to the public will be very important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable Kogo, I think you asked a question. Or after Honorable Kogo, I will allow the CS to answer, and then I open the floor to the friends of the committee. Kindly. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, CS, for the responses that we have had. At some point, when you began making your presentation, I remember you talked about a survey that was done. But from your responses, I have not heard anyone referring to those surveys, whatever information you got from those surveys, because I want to believe that out of that survey, that is what informs whatever you are doing in the ministry.
Honorable Mushangi.
Thank you, Chair. My question is goes to the issue of the partnership that the ministry, that KSCD undertook with the radio stations. We have been told there are 35 radio stations that are doing online learning. And I want to ask what informed the choice of those 35 radio stations? Because there are some radio stations that are not, that do not attract a lot of following, and I saw some of them are listed. Are there associated costs with that engagement, and what informed the choice of the 35, or could it be done otherwise? Thank you.
CS respond to that, then we open the floor for the friends of the committee.
I want to thank the members. In this lot, I will answer Honorable Amos Kimunya, the first question by Pamela, and the third one by Odanga will be handled by P.S. Bello Kipsang, and the last one will be handled by the Director KICD. Now, this is with regard to private schools. Honorable Kimunya is very right that it is the duty of government to ensure that the children, the Kenyan children and the 155,000 teachers in private schools do not lose their workplace. And our stand for the time being is that it is in order for the private schools to negotiate with the parents so that they pay fees that are reasonable for the content delivery that is being given, and also to take into account that the schools have to be kept well. There are non-teaching staff that have to be paid, and the teachers have to be paid. And I think it should be a win-win situation. I will not comment on the aspect of this matter that is in court with a specific entity in the private sector. But the Exchequer is tending capitation to private schools at this moment is very difficult. Maybe it is something that can be looked into futuristically, because usually you choose to leave the government system, which is free, to go to a private school if you think you can afford. So it's an issue that requires some futuristic engagement. Now, Dr. Kipsang, can you address the two others? There was a comment by Pamela, and then one by Odanga, which was basically a sweeping comment, but I would have wanted him to give me the names. But you answer. And then the Director KICD should talk about the radio stations.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think on the question by Pamela on whether we have a plan on coping and recovery strategy, already, Chair, I've indicated that we have developed an emergency response plan that we gave quite some engagement in how we move forward on 1, coping, 2, continuity, and 3, is the last part, which is going to be an acceleration of learning. So this has taken care of it quite well on the question of Pamela. And in fact, on the question also of, I think it was Honorable Pondo, on the issue of psychosocial support. This particular plan, on our page 10 of this plan, has come out very clearly on how we would want to deal with the question of social support to both our learners, our teachers, and even sometimes.
Point of correction, Mr. Chair. I hope he meant Honorable Owino.
Yes, it's Owino.
Yes, sorry, Chair.
Ndewa, yes, yes.
And then on the issue of ICT apps, I would want to acknowledge that, yes, we are aware of what's happening at Ministry of ICT, and Ministry of ICT has taken us through, and we are working with them so that at a level that they think we require to provide certain content that is of educational nature, we are working with the Ministry of ICT towards ensuring that this is properly done and done well. Chair, I would want to be very careful on how we handle the issue of children homes, because we need to separate children homes which take care of children who may not be having a fallback of a home and learning institutions. So we would want the children's homes facilities to remain children's homes facilities. And we shall discourage the children's homes facilities being turned into learning facilities that will contravene what we have said and which may compromise on social distancing and all that which the Ministry of Health is telling us to do. But children's homes remains homes, just like the homes in which we are in. It is only that it may be catering for a number of children that do not have a fallback of a home. I would want to leave at that. But we have not authorized our officers to allow these children homes to continue as a school environment, because we have said that we suspended learning that is physical in nature, where there is an interaction between a teacher and a pupil, because we would not want to create a situation that this will be imported to a learner by a teacher who may be coming from an outside environment. And therefore, the children homes will remain homes like any other home, but not used for learning in this particular time of COVID-19. Chair and CS, I think those are the two areas you wanted me to handle.
Next, KICD, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CS. In one of the responses that the CS has given, he's given a list of all these 35 radio stations. And Chair and members, the criteria we're using to get them on board, we are making a broad appeal for these radio stations to come forward. And in all times we are running our programs or timetable, we put a word there, a statement making an appeal. These FM stations are the ones, and radio stations are the ones that have come forth to be able to offer our lessons. Then we give them our lessons free of charge, and they're able to air the same on their stations. Some are getting direct, and others also getting recorded. So, Chair, the criteria we are making is making an appeal to these community stations. And these that have come, they have not asked KICD for a coin. Neither have we asked them for a coin. But they are saying this is part of the contribution they are making to the public. And, Chair, we continue making that appeal to any other radio stations within the country that can be able to run our content. So, Chair, the criteria is appeal to the stations without necessarily looking at the profit they're going to earn from the content they're going to air. So we give them the content free and they air that to the children. Thank you, Chair.
The questions, all of them have been responded to?
Submit, Chairman, all of them have been responded.
Thank you. Now I open the floor to friends of the committee. I will start with the member for Nyando. Then we'll give to the member for Elisha, yes, Elisha, member for Kitui. And then a member for Gishugu. And then member for Daraka. And lastly, member for Inapkoi. We'll have another round of questions, yes.
I thank you. I thank you, Chair.
Question, yes.
Once again, Jared Okello still remains my name, representing Nyando constituency. Honorable Chair, I've got a question on behalf of the Kenyan parents and guardians having their children in schools. It is true that what we are going through now is unprecedented that no one ever envisaged this situation will ever occur. But here it is with us. Something has to happen. Whereas the government pays for tuition to our children, it is true that our parents and guardians also pay for either lunches or other levies for upkeeps. And when the ministry retreats to craft fees guidelines, one of the things that they consider, amongst other parameters, is the duration of stay in schools. But now that we are in this situation and we do not know how long our children will be with us in our homes, has the ministry considered, because the duration is part of their considerations, to at least slash part of school fees to cushion parents? Because, Mr. Chair, after this, the economy will plummet further, and we are likely to see an economic downturn never witnessed before. So one of the areas where we can help our parents and our guardians keeping children in schools is to relook and review these fees guidelines. So my question to Waziri is whether that has been on their table or has been forming part of their consideration going forward. And I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Isha. And be brief, members. We still have a lot to go.
Thank you, Chair. I start from the premise that we are partners with the Ministry of Education, because as members of Parliament, we invest much in developing the infrastructure that exists in school. But having said that, I listened to the PS. He has highlighted the number of radio stations that are being used to air the curriculum. Some of the considerations that were done by the architects of education was that education was supposed to provide the 4 skills: creative skills, cognitive, psychomotor, and normative. I am glad that students are at home, that parents then can focus on the normative skills and psychomotor skills. But what comes to my mind, the curriculum developed by the acting, being driven by the acting director, Dr. Mabonga, does that curriculum that is aired on radio, does it take cognizance of creative and normative skills? Because most Kenyan parents are more focused on cognitive skills without focusing on creative and psychomotor skills, which are very important. But then let me remind the PS, you are at the epicenter of budgeting. This is the epicenter of the Parliament. So I hope that my colleagues who have made those several requests to the Ministry of Education in the Committee of Education will support the budget that will be presented to them by the ministry, so that the Kenyan child can be able to be taken care of. But having said that, I highlight the issue raised by Honorable Kelo on school fees. I think first term is okay,
yes,
that we close the schools earlier, so the fees can go. But the second term,
Honorable Isha,
let me finish, Chair.
Yes.
I'm finishing.
Yes.
The second term, maybe we can consider, the minister can consider reducing the school fees if the term is reduced. But let me end by saying what Kwame Nkrumah said. Sometimes when you want to help somebody, you must hurt them. Don't focus on the pain, look at the intention of your heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Member for Tharaka.
Thank you, Chair. And for clarification, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm the member for Tharaka-Nithi,
Yes.
not Tharaka, because
Yes,
we have
yes,
another
Tharaka-Nithi,
member for
yes,
Tharaka.
yes, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, all the members who are sitting in this house, or who sit here, including yourself, we consider the vulnerable, the poorest of the poor. We know we have parents who can afford anything and everything. There are those who cannot even afford a meal in a day. My question is very simple. I'm requesting the ministry, if they can consider supplying the radio and the dry cell to the vulnerable and those who are very poor, because this is a situation which is, it has not been there. It is a unique one. So can the ministry consider supplying a radio and a dry cell to those poor families, Mr. Thank you.
Member for Gishugu.
Thank you, Chair. We all appreciate what the pandemic has really put this country into disarray. We are on the same page, and I appreciate that the CS cannot be able to give timelines as to the period or the time that the schools will be opened. At the same time, I believe he can also not be able to give time as to when exams will be done, because the pandemic is not time-bound. We don't know how long it will take. My question is, because exams are not, as he's already answered, exams are not the only way of learning, but it's the only way to gauge performance for progression to other levels. What if the pandemic takes a time, such a time that it will not be possible also to have exams this year, because it might take, I'm praying and hoping that they can even disappear today. But we don't know how long it will take. And he's right to say he can also not tell us when schools will open. Then, does the ministry have a plan B? Because where there is no clear way, there must also be another thought, or the ministry should be preparing for another thought, if it will not be possible to do exams this year, because we don't know how long this pandemic will live with us, although we pray and hope it will disappear as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to ask members that certain questions have been asked. If need be, you don't need to ask them actually, because they have been clarified over and over. Honorable Chepkut, and then we come to member Honorable Nyamai. Just one question, yes.
Okay, not even a question, Chairman. Since Chairman, you are one of the top-notch teacher in the Republic, I do appreciate that you are competent, you are consistent, you have networking and discipline. Professor George Makoha, you are a top-notch. You are a great man. But I want to tell you today, but be receiving phone calls for our honorable members. They love you, but at times you are too busy. I don't know what's happening. But all I want to say, the great Nelson Mandela chairman once said, education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the whole world. Or in other words, it is the equalizer between the rich and the poor, or it is the passport to success. Having said that, Cabinet Secretary, I want you to put in place structured communication so that you'll be communicating to honorable members. They don't have, they like you, but it is you who is distancing yourself. Avail yourself, be accessible.
Thank you.
And Chairman, finally, I have not finished.
Okay.
Let me now talk about
Just one question,
COVID-19.
Chepkut.
I'm now finishing, Chairman.
Brief, yes.
You know I'm a discipline officer. I'm a gazetted officer, so I know discipline. All I want, Cabinet Secretary, I note it very clear. I want you to be consistent. I want you to encourage communication, be compassionate, be as much as you are competent. I don't want you to be rude. I don't want you to be arrogant. Be friendly. tolerate each other.
Thank you.
That's all that I want.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chepkut. Now,
you.
let's go to the member for Honorable Nyamai, kindly.
Thank you, Chairman.
And just be very brief to the point.
I'll try to be very brief. I'll build two scenarios, Honorable Chair, for the Cabinet Secretary. I have 230 primary schools, 70 secondary schools in my constituency. More than half of those schools have no power. And almost half of them, I said they do not have electricity and they do not have network, telephone network. And as the Honorable Member for Tharaka-Nithi was saying, the issue of radio is also a luxury in Kitui South, where I come from, Mutomo and Ikoda sub-counties. And I would like just to tell you that this approach that is being used may not be able to reach 3 of my wards successfully. And the reason as to why I came here is to give this scenario that I have 300 schools where half will not succeed here, and request whether you can go the rescheduling approach. So I do not even need an answer. I just want, because I think it has been asked and people are talking about rescheduling the timelines. 2, the PS has made reference to going back to normal, ability to cope when we open schools. But I just want to ask you whether you have considered the school to be the center of health education, health promotion. I'm saying this because you may give supplies to the teacher, assuming that the teacher has been watching the television and that they understand what to do, yet they do not know. And the scenario which I would like to put to you is that we can use the same approach that we have been using for curriculum development, where you use the head teachers as the center of health promotion as TOTs, then they take this information to school because we don't know how long we are going to have it. And my last comment, Chair, is if we are going to take this, because I believe it's the approach that we have, we put a budget line for it, for giving information to these teachers so that they may become the TOTs that are going to take information to the schools. So those are my 2 scenarios.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me allow the member for Nairobi, Honorable Dr. Pasaris, and then Honorable Professor Dole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I recently asked a question on sanitary towels distribution, and I got an answer through the floor of the House. And the CS's response on sanitary towels, which are meant for our students, was that they were distributed, the manufacturer distributed them to the various counties before the schools closed. And he had enough sanitary towels for every student that was registered for the calendar year. So I'm assuming the calendar year meaning up to December this year. The thing is, I still feel that the students never got the sanitary towels from the schools. We're trying to do a check in Nairobi to confirm if Nairobi students got. So it will be important for us to really know whether we have actually followed through and confirmed that the schools that received them from the manufacturers actually got the sanitary towels before the schools were closed. And now that the schools are closed for a long time, those students are still getting their menstruation, and the parents cannot afford the sanitary towels. That's why we have the program. So there has to be a way that we can still tell the parents that the sanitary towels are in the schools, come and collect them, observing social distance, etc., because that's something that's important. The PS talked about orphanages. Now you have to understand that in a normal family setup, you have a parent, 1 parent, 5 children, or 3 children. But in an orphanage, you've got 1 parent, right? Unless it's the SOS structure where you have 1 parent for 10 students. But in a normal Kenyan orphanage, which there are many of them, you've got 1 parent with about probably 100 or 200 students. Now, to say that in those scenarios, you're not allowing the students to have tuitions or to be able to engage in the learning, I think we will be discriminating, which is against the SDGs, which is leave no one behind. We need to come up with structures that will allow the children in the orphanage to also be able to get their e-learning. Not to say that because there are so many, they cannot, because you're trying to avoid people coming in, going out. I think we have to actually make sure that we have structures. Maybe if you work with ICT, you could actually make sure that each of these homes has the social distancing, which is difficult because they're overcrowded, but we have to try and make sure that we don't leave the children that are already vulnerable, orphans, and then they can't have the e-learning that we want. The other last area is early teenage pregnancies.
Just 2 because of
No,
time.
this is very important. It's about pregnancies. We know that most of our students get pregnant. We had the situation in Kilifi. Students will be, now
And,
that they're at home,
Honorable
they could be
Doctor-
defiled, they could be abused. I want to know, in all this education that we're doing, are we also giving messages to avoid our children being defiled, getting pregnant? Because that is going to be a huge crisis and the result of COVID, because the children are out there and they're not protected. And I do remember that the CS says that this happens during holidays. But now the kids are more or less on holiday. What are we doing to ensure that we don't have a spike in teenage pregnancies? Because that is going to be a disaster in itself in terms of trying to empower the girl child, in terms of getting an education. Are we having a program to ensure we do not have teenage pregnancies, defilement, etc.? Do you have a hotline? Are you liaising with gender ministry? What is the Ministry of Education doing? Because it is your students, our children, that end up getting pregnant during vacation and when at home. And right now, we've seen a spike in gender-based violence, defilement, rape. So is the CS of Education actually feeling that this is something that they have actually got to focus on? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Honorable members, I just want you to be clear on this, that we've stuck to the rule of one question because we have a number of us who want to talk on this. Please stick to that. And two, the rule of relevance, so that we discuss the issues that are within, not so much outside, but so much within the discussion on COVID and schooling. Professor Odwal, last question.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question to the CS is really ignited by his comment and a true observation that examinations is not the only aspect of education. Chair, my question is whether the ministry, in view of the very special circumstances of COVID-19, is considering how we could tap on indigenous education systems. Specifically, Chair, are we thinking of how we can draw from those with whom children are at home? It could be parents, it could be grandmothers, it could be neighbors. What is the ministry considering or reflecting with regards to how, in the times when we are still in this state, when we don't even know when we are going to get to school, how can we tap so that we can have ways by which the students who are at home can get some information, some counseling, some knowledge imparted on values, on making choices, on time management, on relationships, and how they could truly then be made to be people who are rounded up, even as they wait for formal education to open. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will ask the CS to respond to those questions. Thereafter, we shall now move to the next question by Honorable Sabina Chege. And members, you'll still ask because, as I told you, all these questions have a thread line. They run across. So don't worry. You'll still have time to ask. Kindly, Professor.
In the group that will help me to answer is PS Belio Kipsang, PS Juan, the immediate past Director of KICD, will answer the question by Elisha. Dr. Kipsang will answer the one of Nyando. I will start, and then the one that is by my MP, Honorable Esther Passaris, I will answer it partly and it will be completed by CS Bonaya, who is experienced in this area. And then I start, let me see what I can answer. With regard to Tharaka Nithi, consider supply of radio and dry cells at this moment to all the poor people in Kenya. Well, there is no exchequer budget line for this one, and perhaps it is not something that the government can do right now. The one by Ichugu was, what is the pandemic, not give the exams this year. Well, I don't, maybe the honorable member was not here when we started, but I said that within 2 weeks, the government, which includes you, will come out with scenarios. Some of those scenarios, honorable ladies and gentlemen, may well have exams going into next year. But I'm not in a position to say so right now, because I said we are going to engage the critical stakeholders as government and to ensure that whatever we are going to come out with involves everybody, because children belong to everybody. My brother Chepkut is correct. I have heard your advice, and I will ensure that, to the best of my ability, I answer phones. The one for Honorable Nyamai will be dealt with by Honorable Bello Kipsang. My MP, Honorable Esther Passaris, on the issue of sanitary towels, both myself and my CS, whom I delegated to look after the primary and secondary school sector, went out to confirm at random across the nation. She will speak for herself, but from where I sit, each girl child was given a package of sanitary towels for 8 months. Now, we also have to be realistic, ladies and gentlemen. If there are 2 other menstruating ladies in the house and they decide to share, that is now not the concern of the good government of the Republic of Kenya. But I would want Honorable Bonaya to expound further her own experience.
Point of order, Chair. Order, Chair. Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, yes, Honorable Jerusha.
Mine.
Thank you, Chair.
Who is on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's actually.
Thank you, Chair.
What's out of order, Honorable Jerusha?
All right.
I think it is unparliamentary for certain CS words. What did you say? That 2 or 3? You say 2 or 3.
I want to withdraw anything unparliamentary.
Yes.
What I meant.
Withdraw and proceed.
What I meant was that because of African culture, every female was given a packet lasting 8 months. I personally inspected. I wasn't told. Now, if the female goes home with that package, and there are other females and they choose to share, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, point of order.
No, but it is the truth.
Yeah, but Chair, sorry, I wanted to find out from the CS. When was that? When the girls were given the pad? When was it? 8 months starting from when?
Yes.
Before the schools were closed?
Let us, yes, it's just on the point, yes. Allow him to explain it, yes.
Mr. Chairman, the pads were delivered just before, around from November to December to January. And they were delivered through a very elaborate system, because you all know that the honorable ladies of this house came to my office and I promised them that I shall ensure that those pads were delivered. And I've been to certain schools, even in your area of jurisdiction, honorable member, and they got the pads.
Including Tharaka County?
Chair, please.
Yes.
No.
Order members, order members. The CS on the floor, and he was explaining how he is doing the distribution. CS, are you on the floor?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Explain clearly when and in which mode of distribution did you use to reach all the schools so that it is actually understood. And if need be, this is an issue which I want the CS to do. You give us a list of the distribution and how they read the schools and the distribution points so that it is very clear and members who are representative of the people can reach and verify from the ground. Is it? That would be in order. Kindly, CS.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CS. On the matter of sanitary towels, our distribution point has been schools, and it's at the school level that girls receive this package. And just before COVID, this happened to all schools. The pads were delivered to schools, and within the schools, then the administration was able to distribute to each and every girl. So in terms of providing lists and further details, that can be done as you requested. The other issue is on the pregnancy of teenage girls. I want to say that this is a concern, of course, especially at this time when children are at home. It's been quite easy to monitor this in the context of school environment because the administration is there, and we've been working very closely with the provincial administration to ensure that every girl is in school, and if there's any challenge when it comes to pregnancy or early marriage, within our 100% transition framework, we've been working very closely with every stakeholder to ensure that there's no girl who misses class because of such a challenge. But now, considering that they're at home, we also expect the rest of stakeholders, including parents, to come on board to work very closely with us to ensure that our girls are safe wherever they are within their homes, and to also educate parents when it comes to how we can engage not only the girl child, but everybody else, since home is now where learning is taking place. Remember, it's only that the schools are closed, but learning, we understand, should be continuing. And here we are not just talking of online learning. I think as parents now we have a responsibility, because parents are now the go-between the school, I mean the teachers, and the children who are at home. So in terms of even their safety, we all have a responsibility that we need to take up and collaborate to support each other on this, and also to ensure that once we are out of the woods, then there is safe return of all our children, including the girl child.
Point of order, Chair.
What's out of order, Jerusha?
Chair, let it go on record that in Nyamira County, our schools have not received the sanitary towels.
So
if they were delivered when the students had been sent home because of the COVID-19, then maybe. But surely, as representatives of the people, that is what we get from the ground.
So I think the ministry has given an undertaking, and I think the CS, you need to note that the undertaking is that you need to provide very clear information, especially on Nyamira and all the counties. Let me just say this, not even Nyamira alone.
Mr. Chairman,
all the counties, yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman, it will be done, and woe unto he or she who has stolen sanitary towels for our children. That's it, because me, I went to schools at random, many of them, and I was not talking to the teachers.
Yes.
I was talking to the children themselves. And therefore I went to sleep, because if the children have got the pads, so what?
Thank you. Member for Nairobi, any issue?
Yes, Chair, I have an issue. You know, sanitary towels in
And
the
be
last...
brief.
Yeah,
be brief.
Sanitary towels is a very important issue. We're budgeting a lot of money on sanitary towels. It's for our most vulnerable girls. And as a country, we're actually put in the forefront as having been one of the first countries to provide sanitary towels for its girls. The problem we're having, CS, is when we were doing the distribution as women reps, we were making it a very public event. So everybody knew that the sanitary towels were being distributed. I was asking in relation to COVID. Now, having heard that you actually started delivery from November to December, the fact is the ministry has so many social media portals. When you made this delivery, we should have made it public. We should make it public so we can avoid corruption and we can ensure that our children actually got the sanitary towels. I think the ministry will actually be able to realize now that maybe the sanitary towels never reach all the counties, all the constituencies, all our girls.
Chair,
Yes,
Chair,
thank
can
you.
I add something on
I
top?
think, honorable members, I think the CS has given an undertaking. Order, honorable Ngatha. The CS has given an undertaking that he is going to give out a list, he is going to inform you, and if need be, even as members of Education Committee, we had taken an undertaking before COVID to visit schools and verify in person as members of parliament to see which schools have received, which ones have not, so that we write a report and bring it before the House. So kindly, for purpose of progress, let us have it at that. So kindly allow us to answer the remaining questions, and then we proceed to the last question by Honorable Member from Murang'a. Honorable CS, other remaining questions. Be on record, your mic.
have to learn to be a parliamentarian, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
yes.
because the request by Honorable Member for Kitui South, Honorable Nyamai, is very reasonable to ensure that our teachers help us to control the COVID-19. And I hope, Dr. Kipsang, we should provide a budget line. Then I would want to ask Dr. Julius Juan, who is the immediate past director of KICD, is because he knows the history, to answer my own MP, Honorable Elisha. Dr. Juan. After that, Dr. Bello Kipsang will close it by answering the Nyando MP. Honorable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CS. Thank you, honorable members. The question by honorable member for Game was fairly technical, but Chair, allow me to mention that when you're developing curriculum, we take three things into consideration. What we call the psychomotor, which now in the context of CBC, in simple terms, we call it the hands. We have the affective, which we call the heart, and the cognitive that we call the head. Now, in the process of developing curriculum, all this is taken into consideration, but honorable members, you will agree with me that the reason why the matter of e-learning is very emotive is because in the current education system, we spend more time on the cognitive and focus on the exams. And that is why you notice that we almost 100% relate learning to exams. Yes, technically, we know that learning is not necessarily for exams. So when we develop the curriculum, all the areas are taken into consideration. And in the context of the ongoing e-learning, all those parameters are embedded. And if you take time to watch Edu Channel, which is now even on DSTV, or you listen to the radio, or you use your phone to access, you will see that as learning takes place, there are always embedded skills, values, and ethics that are within the learning, and especially in lower primary up to grade 4 within the context of CBC. And within the context of CBC, we also have the parental empowerment and engagement, which is, we developed guidelines and has been distributed by the Parents Association, which also empowers the parents on how they are supposed to support the learners, regardless of whether you learned or been to school or not. And also, we should not forget that actually learning takes place even if we have our children during the holidays. When you talk of responsibility, when you talk of values, when you talk of ethics, I think that was raised by Honorable Member Professor Oduol, all that is embedded in what learning is supposed to be. And it may not be structured when somebody is at home, but learning still takes place. I don't know whether I've answered your question, but the three parameters of learning, and of course, if you look at the Bloom taxonomy, in the CBC, we have even taken it higher and included creativity, which is now the apex of learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair and CS. On the question of Honorable Nyamai, yes, I would want to assure the Honorable Member that as we talk here in today, the capacity building of teachers and making them be able to be part of this particular process of COVID-19 is one that has been budgeted for. In fact, it's the only one that I can almost confirm now that we are funding on this particular item of ensuring that we are able to optimize on the capacity of our teachers and more so the head teachers as part of the coping mechanisms of this particular pandemic. The other one which I just want to touch on is the one of Honorable Pasaris, is that the children homes is a home. So they are able to benefit from the other learning environments that other homes benefit, including the e-learning. So their e-learning and learning that engages on parental engagement, they will be able to be supported by the environment in which they are in, and that they are able to access e-learning just like any other child would access e-learning in an home environment. On Honorable Okello, I would want to say that we shall be, as the Cabinet Secretary has said, is that we shall be able to come out with scenarios on how we move forward on this particular situation in which we are in of COVID-19 and learning, and the question of reopening schools and continuing, having continuity in both learning and the eventual assessment of our children. And when those particular scenarios are put in, we shall be looking at the learning load that is expected of us between the time that we are picking and the time that we would want to do assessment. And out of that, we shall be able to make informed decisions on how the school fees and all other funding that come out of that will go towards these processes will be dealt with. It will not be, at this point in time, be the right point to say that we are going to reduce the school fees or we are going to maintain in what it was. But these are engagements that we shall be able to put ourselves into once we go into the scenario setting, as the Cabinet Secretary has said, and once we enlarge our scope of engagement in terms of the stakeholding that is there in the education sector. Thank you, CS. I think that's what I can say in this particular case.
Thank you. I think most of those questions have been adequately answered. Now we move to the third and the last question by Honorable Member for Muranga. Pronounce yourself on the issues, and then we'll go through rounds of questions, and then we conclude that particular session. Honorable Sabina Chege.
Thank you, Chair, and as a matter of saving time, Chair, I had asked questions to the ministry. I received the response yesterday on the floor of the House, and at the same time, I have gone through the response again today, and so I don't want to tie the CS to go through the answers again, because I know honorable members have already gone through them, and a lot of concerns that I had, Chair, I also want to say honorable members of this House have also asked those questions and clarification. And to avoid repetition, Chair, I just want to tell the CS, I had a privilege of being the chair of Education Committee last Parliament, and we interacted a lot, even at the Health Committee. And COVID is also a health issue, and so I know this is a very peculiar moment, and we are all not very sure of when COVID will end. I was going through your documentation on what you presented earlier, and I saw a comment that the opening of the schools would be staggered, and this was about university. On the first days to allow special interaction of students, I also saw there was a comment that maybe schools will open when there will be no COVID. And being in health, I've seen, Chair, they said we must incorporate waiting for 0 cases plus 2-week incubation period. We've seen even in China, sometimes they have 0 cases, then after 2 weeks, they have other cases. So mine would be much more of comments, because CS and the team has been asked so many questions. One is about the plan to have out-of-classroom lessons. And one of the honorable members mentioned about the traditional way on how we used to do things. Chair, my big question is on Class 8 and the Form 4. And I want this, the entire education sector to take this opportunity as a learning lesson to maybe rethink of what members said, that we should not focus on a one final exam that might be continuous. This is long-term assessment from all the lower classes going up. Then you can have, at least by the end of the, whether it's primary school or high school, then you don't have to wait for that final exam where has been our norm. And so our Class 8, there are not many CS. Our Form 4s are not many. And we don't know when this pandemic will end. Could we have a plan to have them back in school? Maybe the others can wait. Because we know with our children there's anxiety. And without them being sure when, whether they're doing the exam this year, next year, there's a lot of anxiety. And maybe we can deal with that group or that cluster of the Form 4s and the ones who are in Class 8. When I was a young girl, I was in the village, and so the classes were not enough. We used to have a morning session and afternoon session. Is this something that the ministry would consider, having different sessions, so that children can go to school? Then the social distancing and the challenges that we have in our schools, that we do not have enough desks. Some of them would have lockers, maybe at Class 8 level. Not all would have lockers. Then we can use the shared resources to have that. And my other comment is the timetable for KICD. Could this be shared? I am a mother, and I have children. And at my level, even now, it's still, I'm not clear on how my child can be able to access to the information. Even if I have the potential to have the access, it is not clear, whether it's KBC, whether it's online, whether, I don't know, and I have seen you're doing a lot on the media. Make it simple, even if you're using those local stations, so the parents can know, if I have a class 1 child, I can access to this kind of learning at this time. And especially the ones that are using the media, the radio, or the TV, that timetable. And if it's shared with these members here, these members are people's representative. When I go to the village, I can be your ambassador for no pay. And I'll be able to tell the parents, because I am concerned about the children who are at home. And the parents would want to engage them, but they don't know how. And we can be your ambassador. So if that can be shared, and I know there's social media, so we can do it whether on WhatsApp, we can be able to share even with the public and help you. Because this corona is not about you people, it's about all of us. And once we fight this as us, not them versus us, then we'll be able to go very far. The choices of your stations, I also have an advantage that I worked in the media. I would ask that maybe you reconsider, or do you, somebody asked about the research on the reach. For example, let me be very practical. A lot of our people from the central region will tune into some specific radio. Okay, thank you. So the radio, Maria in Murang'a, might not have the reach, and especially its reach is very limited, even to the county itself. And so if there are parents or students who are in, our place, we have the hills, who are down the valley, the reach might not be very clear. So as you choose these stations, whether they are regional or community station, also look at the reach, so that at least you reach to many. And if, like in Murang'a, you have chosen one, you may consider to do your survey and see which one reaches more. And I know there's also a cost there. Some would give you for free, some will also charge you, and some are also expensive depending on their reach. So maximize on the strength of the signal on the station. CS, we will have to make up our mind about KCSE and KCP now, not tomorrow, to help the parents plan, to help the students plan. We can't keep on saying let's make up our mind. So if we say we are going to do KCP and KCSE this year, then the next question is, when do we reopen the schools, or how do we do it? Do we do the community where the teachers can actually now share resources? I know some teachers, maybe I come from Murang'a, but I teach in Mombasa. I might not be able to. It might need a lot of thought and concerted effort, but let us make our minds about our candidates. We may need to provide masks, we may need to provide lockers, but we need mapping. And I hope by the time we reopen, within months' time, we can be able to do that. Chair, my other issue was about the students abroad, and especially the ones who went on scholarship. It's the same dilemma I have as the chair of health. There are people who went to India for treatment. People had traveled. The ones who went for leisure or business, might be they can take care of themselves. Others went to India, they are sick, they have a bill in the hospital or in the apartment, they were not able to come back. And the big question is, how does the Ministry of Health or Foreign Affairs help? So for our students who went out there on scholarship, or even the parents sponsored them, and now they are not able to bring them back, is there a plan to help our students abroad? They are our citizens, they are our children. And on lessons learned on COVID, I want to pick one on encouraging day schools more than boarding. If we are able to make our day schools better, to have enough teachers, enough facilities, and especially laboratories, the day schools, sometimes they were called Harambe schools. Parents did the Harambe. And that's why you see at every beginning of the year, you have parents saying, my child must go to Alliance or must go to Pangani. And there are some few schools in Kenya, like 10, that parents insist that their children should go there. But as a ministry, with the money for infrastructure, though it's not enough, and also through the CDF, could we rethink on empowering our day schools, so that even if we would say we are reopening our schools, we can do half day, but children would not have to travel from maybe Murang'a to come to Nairobi to go to Alliance, but the schools within Murang'a. And also opening Pangani Girls. It's such a good school, such a high institution, Alliance. Could we do a day sector and a boarding sector? this is COVID, it has brought challenges, but as I said, necessity is the mother of all innovations. It might be the time that we need to become innovative. As we think of reopening our schools, CS, I have gone through my county and through the country. Our toilets or ablution blocks, and especially in our primary schools, are so bad. On a normal circumstance, when there's no virus, when there's nothing, when you go to those schools and a lot of children will go without shoes, the toilets, ablution blocks are very bad. Would you consider, and I know this time there are donors, UNICEF and the likes, the World Bank, who are looking for specific projects to help curb the spread of coronavirus. Would you have a plan, and I know it's possible, like a model of how the toilet should have, clean toilets with water, running water where it's possible. If there's no running water, then you can harvest water, have tanks. A standard way of having our toilets. Let's take advantage and save our children, because the toilets in our mainly schools, almost all of them, are in their need. I even saw in some of the quarantine centers, some of the schools, and you saw the ablution blocks. And I think at university, maybe they have a plan. A lot of them have gone digital and they're able to access. I've seen even in our public university, students nowadays at least have a phone or they have a laptop. But what plan do we have to make sure that our universities, especially the ones who are just almost graduating, that we do that transition so we don't keep them waiting, and also we kill the anxiety. So I want to thank you, CS, for a good job. But I know, as I said, the concern raised by members here are concerns that because we represent the people and would want to work together. Finally, on councillors, and that was raised by Honorable Passaris and others, as we bring the children back from home to school. My own son, who is 6 years old, keeps on asking me, when is this corona ending? So when corona ends, will we go, there's already that psychological torture. I think there was a suggestion earlier, CS, that we have counselors in schools, permanent, as we employ our teachers, that we have counselors attached to either each school, every school, or a block of schools. So that the issues that Esther was raising, we know the issue of pregnancies in our school. We've had sexual abuse even amongst the teachers. So if a child knows there's a counselor I can go talk to, who is not the teacher will come and teach me mathematics in the afternoon, then they'll be more free. The issue of drugs is an issue that has really affected our schools. So let's take this pandemic or this challenge of COVID as an eye-opener to see how we can be able to replan our institutions for the better or the future of our children. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Sabina Chege. I'll allow the CS to respond to those issues raised by the Honorable Member. Thereafter, I'll give the priority to members of the Education Committee and then the friends of the committee, as usual. Kindly, members, you'll have time. Honorable CS. Most of those are actually more comments